Hi, this is Mike of Black Cat Amplification. Thanks for checking out this demo. This is a demo of a brand new amp that I just built. This is a 2-watt amp, and it was actually inspired by DLAB Electronics. Now, DLAB has a YouTube channel. I've talked about it on my channel before. But Terry is a really cool guy. Terry designs amps. He repairs amps. He's got a great channel called D, as in Dayton. That's his last name. DLAB Electronics, if you want to check out his channel. So Terry designed this really neat little 2-watt circuit, and I've been really into building a lot of really cool smaller watt amps because they require less tubes. Usually this one's only got 2 tubes in it. They sound huge when they're recorded, and they're just really fun to play. You know, really cool little jam amps, recording amps, things like that. So here's a schematic that came right off of Terry's YouTube channel, right? So it's got 2 tubes. Well, technically, my amp has 2 tubes. I changed it a little bit. So on Terry's amp, he had 2 6AV6 tubes for the preamp section. A 6AV6 tube is like 1/2 of a 12AX7 tube. So this being a 12AX7 tube, it has 2 triodes in it, right? So there's one amplification stage first that goes in the preamp, and on the other side of the tube, the other piece of the pins here, is another stage. So it's really like 2 little mini amplifiers in one. Terry opted to do 2 6AV6s. The real difference here between these two, besides it being, you know, 2 AV6s are kind of like one 12AX7, right? Because this is only one stage per tube. But really, the gain factors on these 6AV6s are only about 80. They're pretty close to a 12AX7 as far as gain goes, but I think they're a little less, at least from my ears, because I've designed circuits with these, and I feel like they just don't have the punch that a 12AX7 has. Now, 12AX7s have become a premium these days, and they can get really expensive, but I just find that most people have these. If they've got tube amps laying around, they can swap them out for different tubes with less gain, which I'll show you that in a little bit. So I decided to go with 2 tubes in this. So it's really the same amp, but it has 1 tube instead of 2. Now, the power tube for this is something you may not have heard of before, but it's called a 6CL6. And I have one right here. These were made back in the day. Here's an RCA one. And these are a 9-pin tube as well. They're a little bit taller than a 12AX7. You can see the difference here. But these guys, when pushed, they're about 2 to 3 watts. I would say 2 probably in this circuit, because I've actually measured the wattage output on this amp, and it's right around 2, maybe just a hair above 2 watts. But this tube is readily available on eBay, and they're pretty cheap. I mean, I got a set of maybe like 10 of them for maybe 20, 30 bucks, something like that. They're really cool. They sound great. These were originally made to be video amplifiers in television receivers, right? But I feel like they had this really cool gain characteristic. It's a little different than a lot of the power tubes that I'm used to. And it's actually got a lot of gain, and I think it sounds good. Like, the gain sounds really nice. So complemented with the gain from a 12AX7, and you get the gain from this power tube, which I think is a little more than most like 6V6s and like 6L6s that we're used to in a lot of guitar amps. Yeah, it doesn't put out as much power, but it's got a really nice, like, warm, kind of overdriven gain sound. I'll show that to you in the demo here. So 2 tubes, pretty simple circuit. For the most part, it follows Terry's diagram. The only difference is, instead of wiring it for 2 AV6, 6 AV6s, I wired it for 1 12AX7. So this is my little diagram that I kind of drew up. There's 1 or 2 parts that may be slightly different just to make it work correctly for the 12AX7, but that's what I have in this. Now, one really cool thing about this speaker cabinet is over 100 years old. It was probably built in like 1920, 1921. This year is 2022, so this is almost 100 years old, if not more. And it had a speaker in it, and I found this thing, and I just thought it's beautiful. I've got to get it. It's very small. As you can see, there's a guitar pedal next to it just for, you know, just for kind of size comparison. But it's called, and I always forget the name of it, Ansonia. So it had a speaker in it. I measured the speaker. It still looked okay, even for 100 years old. It was in pretty good shape, but it was only like 1.5 ohms. It's definitely not enough resistance for a guitar amplifier. You got to have at least 4 ohms in most of the types of builds that I do. So it was not enough. So I took that original speaker out of the cabinet, replaced it with a warehouse speaker. It's an 8-inch, 8 ohm speaker, and it's built for guitar. It sounds awesome. It's a very small cabinet, so you're not going to get a super huge sound, but it is loud for a small amplifier. But I designed this in a Grebe radio cabinet here. This is probably about 1930s to early 40s. So 2 different antique pieces. They were not cheap because they're really nice collectible antiques. So if you're looking for something that you really like antiques, or you want to pick up a new antique piece, but also have something that's totally functional that you can use every day and really looks nice. I mean, together, this combination, the wood tones are very similar, the design of everything, it's beautiful. So I said, I've got to build a really nice low watt amp in this, and I thought this circuit would be perfect. So let's take a look at the back of it. Okay, we're taking a look at the back of the amp and the speaker here. You can see this has a nice little emblem that's still held up after 100 years. Ansonia Reproducer. I did some research on these. They're very rare speaker cabinets. And the speaker inside, it just looked wild, you know. But again, it couldn't really work for a guitar amp. It wasn't enough ohms to make the amp happy, right? It was only about 1.5 ohms. So this requires an 8 ohm load, this amp. But I'll show you what you can do here. I've actually wired a nice little pancake jack here. It's an 8 ohm speaker. You can plug it right into one of these speaker jacks, and there you go. There's your setup for running it with this speaker. Now, this speaker, it does, you know, it's a small box, so it's not going to have a ton of bass response like a big, you know, 212 cabinet or a 412 cabinet. So if you want to run it through another cabinet, you can do that. I've actually designed it so that it has 2 output jacks. So you can run one 8 ohm speaker, or you could run 2 16 ohm speakers. Another thing you could do, it's a safe mismatch to do, one 16 ohm speaker, you could run it in there. It's just not going to have the output and the power that, you know, it's not going to sound as good as just running a single 8 ohm or 2 16 ohms, because that equals a total of 8 ohms, right? But pretty flexible. You have your instrument input right here. I've got a nice little sort of cardboard. It's not cardboard, but like it's called hardboard, like old radio style backing. 2 screws to take off, and then you can change the tubes out. There's a IEC cable, so you can get any length cable. I'll include a 10-foot cable with this. There's a fuse built right into this, so you just take a little screwdriver and pop that out. It's a 1 amp fuse, and that's pretty much it. It's a very simple design. It should last for many, many years. Take it around to the front here. You'll see that when it is plugged in, and I'll plug it in a second, I've got some amber colored LEDs to sort of illuminate the inside of it. You're probably not going to see it too much on the video because it's like there's a lot of bright light in this room. But if you saw any pictures of an ad where I posted it, it's really neat in the dark. It's very lit up, nice and amber sort of colored glow. The 2 tubes here, you could kind of reach in and take them out that way without having to take the back off, but you know, it's a little tight space, so I'd prefer if, you know, you take the back off just so nothing gets broken. But yeah, it's really cool. I'll bring it a little closer. It's got a nice little handle on it. This radio had a really tiny speaker in it, and of course that was taken out. This was actually just a shell of a radio. It didn't have any radio parts in it. So I built a custom chassis for it. I've got the labels right here, so you can see which tubes, the 6CL6 power tube and the 12AX7. Now let's say, you know, this amp has a ton of gain. So if you're not a kind of player that really likes a lot of gain, you can play it clean, sure. But if you really, you know, sort of start to crank it past 3 or 4, the gain's going to really start to fill in and just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And you can even do metal with this thing, you know. Let's say you like to play lower gain. Almost all the amps that I build, you can change out this 12AX7 preamp for something with a lower gain factor. So here's a little chart. You can look this up on the internet. Just look up preamp tube gain values. 12AX7 has a gain factor, or a mu, of 100. So it's pretty much one of the highest gain type tubes. You could put a 5751 in there and have about 70% gain, right? Or a 70 factor of gain. And then, you know, if you want to go all the way down to a 12AU7, that's only got a 17 gain factor. So it's a much less, right? So you could put that in there. All these are swappable with the 9-pin preamp tubes like 12AT7, 12AV7, and you know, lower the gain. This will come with a 12AX7 because this gain in this thing is just so cool. So let's get into it and listen. Okay, so I've got the amp turned on. The amber LEDs are on. Like I said, it's bright in the room. You may not be able to see that so much, but you know, in a darker environment, it's really neat how it's lit up. So I've got the amp plugged into the speaker here. I'm not miking the speaker. I kind of want you to just hear how it sounds with the, you know, the phone microphone, just like you're in the room with me, you know. Now I've also got it plugged in and wired into my 2Notes Captor X box, which allows me to record the amp direct using like speaker emulators. So I'm going to try to maybe mix that into the audio. When I get to the editing, I'll figure that part out, or maybe I'll do a separate section where you can hear just that audio. But that way I can record it here and, you know, show you what it would sound like recorded. Okay, so the amp is set clean, very low volume. There's a tone knob, one tone knob, so I'm going to turn that tone all the way down. Now, none of these pedals are turned on, but I did want to include some, just as a lot of people use pedals with amps, just see what it would sound like. So I've got a reverb pedal here that is kind of set for that slap back sort of sound. Hear that? So that slap back delay. So you could do some really neat, like rockabilly type riffs or things like that with it. Sounds really neat that way. And of course you could use spring reverb or anything else to really open up that sound and make the cabinet sound a little bigger. So I'm going to turn the volume up just a little more. Can do jazz really well. I like to sort of take that brightness down a bit. Nice, beautiful, clean tone. Let's get into the gain. Okay, no pedals are on. Let's see what this thing can do. Turn it up. That's just the amp, man. That's just all on tap gain. This is such a nice gain sound, and I think a lot of it is attributed to not only the gain value of the 12AX7, but this 6CL6 power tube. It's just it's just got this awesome gain to it, man. It's awesome. I love it. So what I want to show you here is, you know, a lot of amps, if you're into playing metal, rock, things like that, a lot of people put boost pedals in front of their amp to really give it that extra bite. So this amp's got a lot of bite on its own. Let's hear what it sounds like with a tube screamer type boost, okay? So here's the amp all the way up. Turn it back just a little because it's a lot of gain. So it's back a little. I'm going to put a tube screamer on, the Ibanez tube screamer. All the dials are set at just about 12 o'clock. Really awesome with the tube screamer. Now I have this Klon type boost, similar type of thing. It's not way up or anything, also just kind of in the middle. What I like about the Klon type boosts, this is just a clone of a Klon, and it's a lot like the Ibanez, except the Ibanez, it really thins out the sound, which kind of sounds good in some applications, but this keeps that deep end as well as adding the bite, so it's a little less, you know, it doesn't thin out the sound. That's with it off. Here's the Ibanez. Really that sort of that high-end crunch, and then this one has that deeper sort of sound. With the boost off. All the way up. With the boost. Really awesome with the boost. So yeah, a lot you could do with this thing. I mean, you can go from 0 to 100 literally with the 12AX7 gain factor and the 6CL6 and get a lot of gain out of a really cool 2-watt amp. Very low. Let me show you the gain real quick with another guitar. That's just the amp. Now with the boost. Let's do the Ibanez tube screamer. nice gain sound, especially with the boost on when you're doing metal type stuff. So it's very versatile. As you can see, you can go from cleans to really, really dirty, and then you have boosts on it, and you get into that really metally territory. Sounds really nice for Doom as well, but I'm going to show that actually on another video, which you can check my channel out for. I'm going to try to post these around the same time. I've built the same amp in this guy. This is a Heathkit. It's actually a hybrid phone patch unit, which allowed you to take your ham radio back in the day and plug in a telephone so that you could do your communications over a telephone. So it's kind of like this converter type thing, but it has a really nice VU meter, which I actually make work. So as you play your guitar, the gauge is gonna light up and the needle's gonna move to that sound. So I will do another demo on this guy, which is almost exactly the same amp, just built into a different container. So I'm gonna do a little bit more with this and the metal tones. All right, thanks for watching.